The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Hello, welcome to October. Can it be October yet? How is this even possible? I don't know. I would like to introduce my Vice President, Hillary Couture, so she can introduce our program tonight. Hillary?
Yay. Thank you. Get it way down. Me and the 10-year-olds. Can you hear me okay? All right. So the process of being an artist starts with learning how to see as an artist. And some of us see too much and we want to write novels with our paintings. And somewhere along the journey, we decide what kind of artist we really want to be, and we choose to write poetry with our work. And that's the kind of artist that we have here tonight. She started as a commercial artist, and then through her own studies and learning things along the way, she's developed her own unique style, which is doing abstract art with a purpose. And Brenda has been awarded the Bold Brush Award, which is the highest award that Bold Brush offers to any artist, as well as the first place in abstract and many months of Favorite 15, which is pretty exciting. And she is participated in the Hoosier Salon, the Southside Art League, the National Abstract. Is that something else?
The Southside Art League, National Abstract.
Okay,
Yep.
That's the same thing. Sorry. She's a member of the Lakeland Art Association in Warsaw. She's a member of our guild, Christians in the Visual Arts, and Hoosier Women Artists. And it is my joy to introduce to you tonight Brenda Stichter.
Thanks. She did a great job saying my name the right way. Everybody says it wrong, and I said my husband's name the wrong way when we started dating. So, I am Brenda Stichter. As I said, I got a degree in college in commercial art, and I'm going to tell you all more about that in a minute. But first, I need you to help me with something. You're going to choose what we're going to paint. So I want someone to pick a word, a verb, an emotion, a phrase, something that's hard to paint realistically. And I'm going to choose one of those that I think I can manage. and I'm going to start that now, and then I'll go more into my talking. So who's got a great idea or a few? Disgust. Communication. Humor. Grief. Sorry? Compassion. Love. Connecting. And emotion? Emotion in general. Sarcasm. That would be the most fun. Oh, hi, Bruce. My husband showed up. Also, I need to explain, my lovely assistant here, my son, Jake, is here to help me with things. If anybody doesn't have a handout, Jake will help with that, unless he already has. Okay, so I think I'm going to choose connection, and I'll explain why more in a minute. But I'm going to start out using some of my Golden and Matisse acrylics. I use the best acrylics I can buy because they have a really heavy load of pigment, and I know what to expect with them. And I'll be telling you more things about them as we go. I'm going to start out with turquoise and magenta. I'm going to mix them together and come up with probably my favorite color, which you may not expect if you've not mixed turquoise and magenta together before. I know it surprised me the first time. Can you see what color it is? A really rich purple. I've mixed in a little more of the turquoise here, so it's getting a darker blue. A little more magenta. These are not open, so I'll have to keep going. They do dry really quickly. There are things you can do to keep them from drying too quickly, including using a medium of almost any kind. This is just a gloss medium, and it will slow down the drying, but not a lot. So I'll just mix a little of that in as I go here. And I'm starting out with a composition, which is what I like to do. I like to pick my theme first, then I try to choose my colors and my compositions that will accent what I'm trying to say with my painting. So give me just a minute on a couple of these things. Okay, we'll start out right there. And I'm going to spray it just to keep it a little damp. This is just water, just to keep it so that I can keep interacting with it. Okay, first I want to tell you a little bit more about me. I got my commercial art degree at Northwestern College in, Northwestern College is now Northwestern University in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I got an associate's degree in commercial art, and kind of tied in with that was a Bible degree. I don't know how quite they did that, but I packed that 2-year degree into almost 3 years. Then I went down to Texas to college, where I met my husband. I thought I was going to become an aeronautical engineer, and instead I got married, thank the Lord. I started out then with representational painting, representational illustration, studied design and some of that stuff as a commercial artist. And that's what I did when I set my art aside while I raised my kids and all that, but whenever I was doodling and dawdling with stuff, it was always representational. I really had no understanding at all of abstract art, but some friends commissioned me all of a sudden to do a large abstract painting for them. And so I had to start studying and understand, how do you do an abstract painting that is worth looking at? So if you're wondering how I got started, that's it. A few things that I've done, I'm putting this in the intro just for your frame of reference. A few things I've done that have been really helpful for me. I've done 30 paintings in 30 days challenges online. Many of you might, I know a lot of you do these already, but every day you are supposed to come up with a painting. The big multicolored painting over here is an example of 12 pieces that I did in a 30 in 30 challenge. You can see a lot of the different compositional choices there, some of the color theory. Those are, real quickly, my husband helped me come up with a theme. Those are stones found in the Bible. That's one particular set of gemstones found in the Bible. So there's a paper there. It'll tell you what each of those stones is. I would research the stone and then try to represent it in an abstract way. I studied on YouTube a lot. You'll have in your handouts, there are some links to that. I did a lot of competitions and studied sites where people painted every day and entered stuff every day, just trying to figure out, what's a good abstract. I wanted to do something that was a cut above, I guess. I'm also a studier. I love research, study, that kind of thing. So if I'm going to do something, that's where I start. And one surprise fact, I'm a pilot. My family is an aviation family, and I got my pilot's degree before I met my husband, who's also a pilot. He's a flight instructor, has a lot of other degrees or ratings in aviation, and neither of us is flying right now. So that's just to let you know who I am a little bit. Let's move on to composition. In your handouts, second page has some illustrations of compositions. There are probably at least 100 compositions that people say are traditional compositions. So I chose a few. And I tried to illustrate them so you could get an idea of how these are laid out. And some of them, I gave some of the ideas that are communicated by these compositions. Some of them I didn't. Some of them are a little trickier to write down in a single word what they might indicate. So probably a lot of these you've seen, a lot of them work really well with landscape painting. Letter shapes, great with landscape painting. Tunnel vision, super with landscape. Vertical works really well with like a forest. But they also communicate well in an abstract painting. So I have on my list, maybe on yours, a few that I did not put on that list, including curves. Right, I didn't put it on yours. Curves is, when you use a curved composition, the idea is to use almost everything in a curve shape. It is an organic, flowing, inclusive feel. And so if the concept you're trying to communicate has that kind of an idea that you want to get across, curves is a great way to go for a composition starting point. Also in every one, the very first one on your sheet is golden section, tic-tac-toe. It can be called golden sector, rule of thirds. It's the idea that your focal point will be in one of these 3 points. If you divide your canvas like a tic-tac-toe board, your focal point and the most interesting things in your painting should be in one of those 4 spots. So, curves. Let's look at diagonal. How would we communicate diagonal? I'm going to add, let's see. I'm going to add quinacridone nickel azo gold, which is a great color. It makes every other color look fabulous. It also disappears really quickly from my palette. So, and we're going with diagonal. I'm going to show you a couple of the tools I use frequently. When I'm covering an entire surface, I start with a textured canvas or paper, whatever I do. I use my gesso really heavily. I throw drips on there. I put scratches in it. Anything that will cause the paint to react to the different texture on the canvas, on the surface, is something I try to do. I paint with old credit cards, with whatever I have. I don't know if you can see, but this is starting to bring out the texture that's already on the paper. Maybe from the back you can't really see it. A diagonal composition suggests motion, energy, action, urgency. So if you're communicating something like that that's really moving forward, thank you, this is a great composition. And it works really, really well. Surprisingly, when you look at just the start of it like this, it's kind of, you can't imagine how that could make a great painting. But if you look over at some of my paintings there on this end, I have done a couple of them with the diagonal composition. So when I paint, starting out with the composition, a lot of times I throw the composition on there and get ready to interact with whatever happens as I get the composition going. Also, just like I use a lot of gesso at the start, I like to leave a lot of texture in my paint. So I am not used to painting from the side, so sorry if it turns out kind of wonky. Hopefully you can see with almost every composition style that we choose, we still use a focal point. We still use the rule of thirds. They combine. And a lot of composition styles can combine and make an interesting painting, but just a simple composition style can carry a painting and make it strong. So this is diagonal, obviously. And, okay, one other that I have on my list is portrait or spiritual. When people are painting figures, and often, especially in portraits, the figure is in the middle. And that is important in figure painting. That is the most important thing about what you're painting normally. If you're painting the whole figure, you may want to express something different than the personality of the person, the facial expressions. So you may do something different with it in that case. But just as a principle for composition for that kind of painting. Need more paint. I told you I use golden painting for painting. Also Matisse, this is an Australian brand, and it's getting a little harder to find, but they have really good paint. When you are trying to cross brands, we'll get to this more with color theory, but you can read on your label, there are little letters and numbers that communicate what pigments are used in each paint. So if you want to communicate the same color in Matisse and in golden, you can compare these little colors on here, numbers on here, and that'll communicate the same color across. And what you want to watch for is how many colors are in, like how many pigments are in each tube, and what they use to carry it. How much acrylic base is used in it, so that you want it to have a good pigment load so that it can communicate well. So I have a whole lot of information on this worksheet. Normally this takes me like 4 weeks to teach. So sorry if I get to a lot of talking or not enough painting or something, because I'm trying to pack it all in. I'm going back to purple. I want to communicate a little bit about the spiritual. A reason this can be called a spiritual composition is often the focal point is right in the middle. That's a rare thing to do. But for example, if you have a painting and there's a focal point like that, circle right in the middle. For example, a Zen Buddhist, as I understand it, I'm not a Buddhist. I don't I don't know what their theology is or however you would say that, but that would be something that was a spiritual communication for someone like that. For me, I'm a Christian. Jesus Christ obviously is the one that I focus on when I paint. For me, something that in a portrait or spiritual composition that would be more significant might be a triangle for the start of the composition. And this is often the start for a portrait too, because it's stable at the bottom and it gives you a feeling of stability. So my other blank canvas, I was going to show you the rule of thirds, but I think from what I've been seeing, most everybody understands if you divide in a tic-tac-toe pattern, rule of thirds happens in those four corners. So let's move on to the purpose and theme connected with composition. So on your worksheet with many, many, many words, there are some lists of pairs of things, and I think that we could take those and pair them with a composition. It doesn't need to take very long, and you can do it on your own if you want. But for example, empty and full. A real quick look from my perspective, a constellation or a meandering would be great for empty. It suggests a lack of focus. It can be meaningless. Those would both work really well for empty. Full, for me, cruciform, because again of my Christian connection. Also, like overlapping frames possibly could have a full feeling to it, where you have a lot of the same shape that overlaps. And one will be different where the focal point is, but a lot of it will be similar. Happy, sad, him and her, lazy and energetic. You can look at these and think to yourself, which ones would these be great with? I don't think I would ever put lazy with a diagonal composition, unless I were being sarcastic. Where did John go? But energetic could easily go with a diagonal composition. The one that I found in this list that I thought looked like a lot of fun was waltz and jitterbug. What would you choose for a waltz? what would you choose for a jitterbug? So those are some things to think through on that. So I'm going to change my glasses because I won't be able to see you, but I'll be able to see my paper and my painting. I want to move into color now. This is something that, as I was studying, I learned a lot about. Online, I found somebody named Scott Naismith that is a really intriguing person to watch on YouTube. He's funny in the way he presents things, but he's also a very learned person, knows a lot about color. He introduced me to something called CMY color theory. How many of you guys know about CMY? Okay, a few. This is a CMY color wheel. This is a free one that can be printed off the internet on Scott's site. There's a link to it in your handout. CMY, the basic principle is that the primary colors are not red, blue, and yellow like we learned in kindergarten, but they're cyan, magenta, and yellow. He and some other people on YouTube also go into why those colors are better primaries for artists who are mixing color than red, yellow, and blue. If you practice with red, yellow, and blue, you'll notice it's really hard to get a great purple if you're starting just with your basics. It's really hard to get a great green just with your basic colors. Yep, and orange is also very difficult. It can be done, but it's tricky. But if you start with magenta, and for me I have quinacridone magenta, most lines of paint will have something that is a magenta paint. Cyan, which actually I use another one, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. Cyan is a primary. It's kind of like a sky blue type of a color. Well, you know from your printer, the inks in your printer, cyan, magenta, yellow, black, and a basic yellow. These colors can mix far more colors and make true colors than red, yellow, blue like we had in kindergarten. So this is something that Scott Naismith has on his website. He shows that if you draw a line from cyan across to magenta, where it crosses is going to show you what color you're going to get when you mix those colors together. And as you see, it's a pretty rich purple. And if you remember, when I was painting, I mixed magenta and kind of a turquoise color and came up with this purple that I absolutely love. The same happens with the yellow and magenta. You get a really deep red. And I'll show you my color charts. This I did this morning using the CMY color wheel. If you can see, let me see. Here's a red, and pardon me, but I was going quickly this morning. So it's not a real deep red. There's a lot of water in it. But this is magenta and yellow together. Here I'm starting with the magenta, going to cyan. There's clearly a nice purple in the middle. Going to yellow. It gives me some beautiful greens. I love these greens. And then over to the orange and, again, the bright red. Here I'm showing the cyan and magenta together, showing the purple. What I like to paint with, though, is turquoise, like I showed you. The magenta, quinacridone magenta. And where did I put it? Quinacridone nickel azo gold. This is my yellow, though it leans toward red. The turquoise obviously leans slightly toward green. So you have to play with it a little, but it still has the clarity of the magenta, the cyan, and the yellow, so you still can get a full range of colors just using those three plus white. And I rarely use black, but you can use black also with that. So this is my chart I made this morning using those colors. Nickel as a gold, if you thin it, gets pretty yellow. Obviously, to magenta, to turquoise, and all the colors are represented. When we use color to communicate, kind of a basic thing that most of you probably know because you're artists is that there are colors that are complements of each other across a color wheel. Those things conflict with each other to some degree. If you don't choose a way to tone them or tie them together, they can be jarring. competitive, and they'll pull your eye back and forth if they're at the same value. So a way that you can tone those down is called desaturating or graying. It would be like mixing the complement. In a red, yellow, blue, we already know those complements. The same happens in a cyan, cyan, magenta, yellow. There are complements, and if you mix across the color wheel, tiny bit, it'll tone that down just a little bit, as you can see on either of these color wheels. And so if we are painting a painting that has as its primary color theory concept the complements, so again, for arguing, I forget what some of those words were. There were a few words that were kind of jarring, and if we were using that, we would choose a composition that is a little sharper, a little more in conflict. We would choose a color theory that would be a complementary color theory, and then find ways to tone that together. So I would gray it out. Another thing you can do with complements, well, you can use tints and shades. You can go add white to it, add a lot of neutral color to it, which is always a good idea in any painting. Use a lot of neutrals. You can make those neutrals by mixing together your primaries, and that will tie the whole thing together, just like using any limited palette will tie your whole work together. Let's talk a little bit about analogous painting. Again, because you're artists, you know these things, but let's revisit them. By the way, I do this. I restudy my composition, my color theory, all these things regularly. I practice regularly, especially the ones that I'm not good at. I will revisit them a lot on a daily painting or a challenge like that. I really try to broaden my vocabulary by practicing those things that I don't know. So analogous colors, let's go with this one. You know, a red, orange, and magenta, 3 colors that are close together on a color wheel are analogous. Analogous can be friendly, it can be unifying, it can be boring. What do we do to keep analogous colors from being boring? We can throw in the complement, or we can throw in other colors that work well with the analogous that just bring out the qualities of an analogous color theme. Just make your eye more interested to see what you're looking at. Again, I keep looking over here because I have examples over here of analogous color theory, of complementary color theory. So if you want to look over there. Oh, I should say this too. Sideline. Whiplash, we say in my family, if it's totally unconnected to the thought at hand. There are little QR codes by each of those paintings. If you scan that with your phone, it can take you to the blog post that I write about each painting when I do it. A lot of those blog posts will either tell you why I chose the color theme and composition I chose, or what I was reading about. I often take my themes from my Bible reading in the morning, so it might tell you what I've been reading about and why I feel like this kind of composition accents what I've been reading about. So that information is all there, and you can find it on my website and those things too. So shameless plug, I guess. All right, we already mentioned neutrals. When we're painting, sorry, I have an empty easel. I knew it would be really hard for me to figure out how to do both the painting and the talking at the same time. When we're painting, especially with acrylics, I'm not sure about oils. I haven't got a lot of experience with that, and definitely with watercolor. We need to choose light to dark, dark to light, which way we're going to do. Actually, usually I would choose light to dark, but because I was wanting to emphasize the composition choices with you, I chose to go dark to light this time around. But that's something with your color as you work with it. Probably, again, you all know this because you're painters, but it's important to choose one way or the other and paint all over the canvas at the same time. Like, don't finish this little spot and then work out from there, because you'll lose continuity across the whole piece. The colors I use are transparents. In acrylic lines, again, I know the most about acrylics. In acrylic lines of paint, there are color, not theory, the way the color is made. Some are transparents by nature, some are opaque by nature. For example, a cadmium red, opaque. Can't see a thing through that. I don't care for red, so that's way down on my table. These colors all, you can't see it. These colors that I'm working with, I will show you in a second here, but they're all transparent, so they all interact with each other. You can glaze over them or put them side by side and then blend them together because they're transparent and they interact with each other in that way. I love transparents. You can make them opaque by adding white or black to them if you need to correct a problem or bring some light back to the canvas somewhere. You can add white either to the paint or you can paint white and then glaze over that. Glazing, if you don't know, is taking your paint, adding some medium to it or some water, but medium works better. It thins it out and you can put a coat over and it will change the colors underneath. Okay, let's work a little bit more on connection. Is that what it was? Connection. So I'm going to not talk for a little bit. Feel free to talk or ask questions, but I can't paint and talk at the same time. Though I'll try if I need to. I'm going to use my quinacridone gold, and I'm going to use my, yes, Hansa Yellow Light. It's another transparent yellow. It's a cool yellow, but it's also a primary in the CMY. I'm going to use these colors to try to bring a little light to this canvas. And if I need to, I'll go back to some white. I use a lot of different tools when I'm painting. My husband found me this tool. It's normally twice this big. It's used for spreading glue or something, mastic, when you're sticking tiles on the floor, stuff like that. And we cut it up and I use it for shaping my paint, adding my paint, stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to need some white with it. You can see actually how it's competing with that purple. It looks not very communicative. Let's see what we can do with the Quin Gold. Okay, the Quin Gold will tie in better, but I'll need more light. I'm going to go back to my brush and some more medium and try to get a glaze. And so, pardon me if we don't get a nice painting. Usually, I start out like this, get a lot of texture built up, get a lot of base colors built up, and then I will come back to it several days to try to get it to where I want it to be. And since I didn't know what I was going to paint till I got here, that's my excuse if it doesn't turn out well, because I couldn't practice. So I use really nasty brushes when I paint. As you can see, this is super cheap and the end is really beat up. If I have a good brush, I usually beat it up a little bit before I use it. I do have some good ones because I do also paint other things besides abstracts. But for most of my abstract painting, I use things that are in tough shape like that. I don't know if you can see how bad that is. I use color shapers a lot. It's like a rubber spatula or silicone spatula. Moves paint in the coolest ways. Yeah, I don't know if I can. You can get these through art supply stores. I order almost everything from Jerry's Artorama online. I don't know who I'm pointing at. Okay. One of the tools I use the most in my studio is actually a kitchen spatula that's silicone, really wide. Yeah. Love it. I use it in almost every painting. So I do buy a lot of tools from hardware stores and kitchen stores. And this tool, by the way, if you don't have one, you should, as an artist. This is for opening your paint when it gets stuck. It's so much better than a regular pliers. It doesn't chew up, you know, the lid. It's by Golden. I think it was $2. It might be more than that by now, and you might not get it till next Christmas. But but it's a really good tool for getting them open when they're stuck. I would try the art supply stores. It is called, see if you can read that. It's been really helpful for me. And what was I going to do while you opened that? Oh, I was going to tell you this. When I paint, I use my hands a lot too. And just to protect my hands and to be able to get them clean, I use this gloves in a bottle. It's a lotion, seals my hands really well, and I can get them clean. I didn't use it this morning, and I have paint left over from this morning, but I would recommend this for, it doesn't have it. Okay.
It just says Golden.
I would Google like golden paint cap opener and see if it gives you a link. I got it at an art supply show at a Golden booth, so, but it was a really useful tool. Oh, it's on Amazon. Thanks. Okay, I was going to glaze. Lost my place here. There we go, you guys. Is it on Jerry's? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to try glazing. Some of this is still wet enough that it's going to smear, but I just want you to see how it really deepens the color when you add the Quin Gold. I don't know if you can tell. But the Quin Gold can make every color just look richer and deeper, in my opinion. This is where I won't get it on the carpet, I promise, but at home, it would be all over the carpet. So you can drag this through and pull out the color, for example. So now I'm really just playing. I'm not thinking much about my painting, I'm sorry to say. But I just want you to see what the color can do. Let's try going with a little yellow here. Also, somebody, it might have been Gwen Gutwein, I'm not sure, somebody who demonstrated with us last year talked about, or the year before, last year was a weird year, talked about using, what are these? Microfiber, thank you, microfiber cloths. I went online while she was speaking and found like 50 of them for $10. So you can use them even instead of paper towels and stuff and just wash them, and they're fabulous. They work well. So, well, I mean, I've washed this a few times, but it's enough that I can use it again. So I'm going to try glazing just a little yellow. Boy, I get loud when I look down. I'm going to put some yellow with this Quin. All right, so it's pulling the quinacridone and turquoise that I put together. It's pulling it down here, and see how it's getting that bright red? That's why I love these colors. They're so interactive and fun to work with. I like the surprises as an abstract painter. Then I just have to decide if I'm keeping it or letting it go, painting over it. With acrylics, you can paint over anything, so you know, nothing's permanent. It's fantastic. We always want to make sure that we have, whatever we do, it should be represented in all 4 quadrants of the painting. So if we are doing some sgraffito, where we're like scratching through the paint, it should happen in all 4 quadrants, and you can't see that. If we use a tool with texture, if we put drips or something like that, it should be in all 4 quadrants. It doesn't need to be as strong in all 4 quadrants, but it should be represented in some way. So even like the bright yellow, is going to be too bright in most places. So desaturate it, add a little bit of its complement or another color, but just make sure it's in those places so that it ties the whole thing together. I told you I was going to stop talking, and then I kept talking. Okay, so from what I can see, this is getting super busy. And there's not really a clear focal point. I know where I want it to be. Where do you see it? Okay. All right, this is where I'm thinking I want to put it. So, but this has got the highest contrast of color, so I need to tone that down. So I'm going to start with some more Quin Gold. This is going to end up having a lot of Quin Gold on it. But I really want those other colors to show through, so we'll be revisiting them. Oh, there's another color thing I want to show you too if I can. I'm going to just use my scraper to add some white because I want to bring the attention back down to where I intended the focal point to be, and then I can do more glazing or mixing if I need to. So I'm going to put this in here. And then I want to give that some shape. Yeah, that looks terrible. Most of my paintings look absolutely terrible in process. I hope that you all, when you're painting, get to a point where you think, what have I done? This is awful. That happens for most. Yes. So, yes. So at that point, usually go on. But once it gets better, then stop. So yes, it looks bad. But you're able to kind of see where we're headed. I'm going to put some more white because I'm losing all my magenta. I want to bring a little more of the magenta, and I'm losing all of my turquoise, and I want to bring some of that back. So I'm going to put white back in so that eventually those things can be brought back. How much time do I have? Anybody?
About 35 minutes.
Okay. All right. All right, so I want this one to be lighter because that's not my focal point. That's not where I want the most interest to be. I want my focal point back down here. And you'll see this white has other colors mixed in, but that's going to be okay. And now I'm not liking how everything's coming this way. So I want to. Can you see it? I'm sorry. So I want to see if I can bring some things in this way to compete a little bit. Now this is a secret probably I shouldn't tell you, but curves is one of the compositions that is one of my most challenging. I love to work with it because it's hard for me, but it's really challenging for me to get to a good painting together with it. Oh, that sounded a lot like an excuse. It kind of was an excuse, but. Maybe. I like mine. I do like my paintings to go to the edges more than they say is a good idea. There's usually a reason when I do it that way, but also I like a curved shape, but I'm more into the S shape in a painting. Like when I go look at paintings in a museum or whatever, I like the curved shapes, but usually not necessarily the round. I like rounds, but I don't like that to be like the whole painting. So I probably won't finish this one here, but when it goes home, it's going to get a lot of that taken out as I go. Thanks. I don't know who said it, but thank you. Well, that makes me feel much better. Thank you.
Sort of celestial. It is.
Yeah, thank you. There, that was amazing. Yes. Yes, and that's one drawback from painting from the side and being right up front. You can't see what you're doing. So I don't know how people do it who demonstrate all the time and teach all the time. It's a challenge. Yeah. Let's move on to focal point a little bit. We've already talked about it some. Focal point is the point in the painting that is the most important. It's the point that tells what it is that you're trying to talk about with your painting. If you're just talking about beauty, that's okay. Beauty should be your focal point. That should be what speaks the most to you as an artist about beauty, the thing that draws you to want to paint that. Somebody told me that one of the plein air instructors recently talked about the hero in your painting. That's what I'm talking about. The thing that draws you to want to paint. And I know that feeling. If you feel like you have to paint, that's what I'm talking about. If you're painting an abstract that's trying to communicate communication or connection, the focal point should be the thing that communicates that the most. That should be the part, for instance, on this, I need to make some way for that to connect with all the other points in the painting, and that should be the thing that communicates it. The focal point should draw our eye. The rest of the painting should have resting places for the eye so that it's not all super busy unless that's your intent for what you're painting. The way that we can create a focal point, some of the ways, and hopefully you know these things, a size difference, big to small, value difference, the strongest value competition should be where your focal point is. It's the same in representational painting as it is in abstract. The strongest color difference, so straight out of the tube magenta, straight out of the tube turquoise, straight out of the tube gold should be in that focal point area. The rest of it can be, desaturated a little bit, maybe some points that have full strength, but that focal point is where it should be. Hard edges versus soft edges should happen there. There's a little soft edges. A lot of times in acrylics, it takes a lot of work to get the edges nice and soft, but you can. And edgy versus curves, which I'm not going to do in this one, but if I have a painting that's almost all straight edges in some way and almost all hard edges, the curves are going to happen where I want your eye to go. Other things, other principles that are important, and I'm tearing through it. A lot of you have already studied this stuff, and it's really important in an abstract as well as in a representational. The principles of art: line, shape, value, value contrast. Where is your light source? Texture, perceived or real. In other words, did you put polka dots in there to give a feel of texture, or is the paint raised up so that you have real texture? Where is your form in the space on the painting? And does it communicate what you want it to communicate by being where you put it in the painting? Are the elements that you're using in all four quadrants? Are you using odd numbers of things? I think we all know this rule, but it's a much more pleasing thing generally to the eye if there's an odd number of elements, whatever they may be, in your painting than if they're an even number. Things should move into the canvas, not out. They shouldn't be falling off the edge. Again, unless that's what you're saying with what you're painting, then it should fall off the edge. But if not, they should draw in. Your eye should draw in to the painting. And your painting should be more interesting the closer you get. It's got to be interesting enough to catch somebody's eye from across the room. But as you get closer, there should be enough that somebody could look at it for 500 years. That's how long I want my paintings to last. And still be finding things that they like to look at. So those are some of the principles that you have studied as artists, and they also come into play in an abstract. let me slow down, stop talking so fast here for a minute. I want to know from you guys if you have any questions, but also, do you feel like you have a way that you could start pursuing an abstract painting to try it from some of this information? Okay, that's something I'm hoping for you. I'm going to go right to my resources section, and then I'll start working on the painting and let John take over. So I've talked to you about my tools, mostly credit cards, this little shaper, the rubber scrapers from the kitchen, the terrible paintbrushes. I also use both ends of the paintbrush. So like my sgraffito will come from the brush handle. I might use sticks, whatever I find that I think is going to make a really interesting line. I am not fond of a perfect line, of a perfect straight, of a perfect circle, any of that. So I try to make all of my tools imperfect so that my paintings will not have those perfect things intentionally. I do like I've done a grid painting recently that I wanted the lines straight, but I didn't want them to be, beautifully painted with a nice brush. So I took a yardstick, dipped it in the paint, and then thumped the canvas against the yardstick. So it carried across, but it wasn't a perfectly fine, beautiful, mechanical looking line. When I paint, I use a lot of layers. The daily paintings like those, maybe 1 or 2. My big paintings, probably at least 10. Not every point of the painting has 10, but a lot of them. And I love the buildup of the texture, the way the color like whispers through the bottom layers to the top layers and still communicates even though it's not the first thing you see when you look. Sgraffito, I mentioned, scraping shapes into the paint, using the brush, using a palette knife, whatever it may be. It's interesting. When you get close, it's interesting. It makes you want to look more. I use a pencil. I use other mark-making tools in a lot of them. Some water-based pastels and some things, but then you might need to know how to seal that so it's not going to, blend out. I used some iridescence. I brought along an interference paint. I'm going to show you. You'll have to probably look closely at it. And this kind of paint, if you put it on a dark paint, a dark background, it will reflect a different color out. And you don't see it all the time, only when you see it in certain lighting. It's super cool for abstract painting. Really love it. And just for the end of my talking part, at the bottom of your flyer, I think I have a couple of quotes there. Yes, so from Art and Fear, which probably a lot of you have read. It's a very good art book. He says, simply put, art that deals with ideas is more interesting than art that deals with technique. So I just spent a whole lot of time telling you about my techniques, but the point is they're communicating an idea. And that makes the painting a lot more interesting. And then this is from, I went to a play that was fabulous. In the program, he said, I believe that art hints at the deeper structures of reality. And to me, especially as an abstract painter, that just really hit deep. And I loved that quote. So I'm going to play with this a little more. Probably won't end up being what I want, but I'm happy to answer your questions. Yes?
I do have a technique question.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned that you like putting in your focal points a lot of layers.
Uh-huh.
And I like doing with a lot of layers too, but
Uh-huh.
I find that I can turn into mud if I'm not careful.
Yes,
Because it seems to eat the light after a while.
it does. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'll repeat that question. Okay, hi Zoom. I'm honored. I will repeat your question. She mentioned that in the focal point, I mentioned using a lot of layers, and how if you use a lot of layers, it can turn your colors to mud. Absolutely true. Part of it depends on your color theory. If you're using the colors that don't play well together, they're going to turn to mud. But also, too many layers can do the same thing, even if they're all transparent layers. So what you can do then is go in and make one of your layers a white layer again. And it's like starting all over again. It gives you that light value again, the light colors again. So what else can I answer? And what have I forgotten? Yeah. Whiplash, we say. Oh, did you want to use the mic?
It's going to go a lot taller than it was for Hillary.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's, can you hear me all right? On YouTube, have you seen these poor acrylic painters?
Yes. Yep.
I'd like to know your opinion of that exercise.
Oh boy. Okay. Poured acrylics can be done very well. You often can tell when you look at a poured acrylic painting whether that person understands the principles of art. Is there a focal point? Is there a composition? Do the colors play well together? Is there any control whatsoever? Some poured acrylics are just somebody who likes to play with paint. I love to play with paint, so I understand that. But there are some acrylics that acrylic pours that I don't value personally. Good answer? Okay, what else can I answer? There's a mic.
Moon River. Oh, according to the two wheels that you're talking about, the color
Yes.
wheels, which is your favorite then, this or Robert's?
Oh, Robert Burridge too.
Yeah.
Again, it depends what I'm painting. Robert Burridge has his own color wheel. You have on your handouts references to Robert Burridge on YouTube. I've taken a couple workshops from him. He has his own color wheel that he uses that picks out color combinations that have worked well for him when he paints. Those combinations are different than you will find on a traditional color wheel or a CMY color wheel. And she's asking me which one I prefer. The one I like Robert Burridge's wheel. The thing I notice though is I see it everywhere. When I look at sites where people are painting and a lot of paintings show up, a lot of people are using that color wheel. And I want mine to be mine. So I do use his at times, but I prefer to play with it myself and see if I can come up with good combinations. Anything else? Okay. Okay.
We always see and love your abstracts. You said you paint other things.
Yes, I
Is
do.
there a chance we would ever see your other things?
Yes, there is a representational section on my website. And I did bring my attempt at last month's challenge. But I told John about this. I didn't bring a chair or an easel or anything, so I was balancing water, paint, painting, everything on my knees as I was trying to paint, so it's not great. But yes, you can see them on my website, and if you would like, sometime I'll bring them in.
Will you bring one into
I
the
will
gallery for the
yes.
next round? Thank you.
Would you look in the box for my other painting? Yeah. Anything else I can answer? I feel like I've used a week's worth of words.
Okay, we're going to take a short break while she paints. So
Thank you.
Production facilities provided by Access Fort Wayne. Learn more under the Explore tab at acpl.info.